What if I had told you that Ethereum, the giant of crypto, recently stumbled and an underdog network stepped up without missing a beat? Right? It happened, and it might just change everything that we think we know about crypto's future. Let me set the stage. You heard the term Ethereum killer being thrown around, right? Well, I usually just roll my eyes at that. Ethereum, of course, is the big dog after all. But I just watched something that made me do a bit of a double take. A few days ago, part of Amazon's web servers went down. Yeah, that Amazon, by the way. And it caused chaos for a whole bunch of applications and even some tokens like Ethereum. Transactions, they slowed down. Things just got weird. But one network, Hedera, also known as 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗰𝗍, just kept cruising along like nothing happened at all. There was no pause, there was no hiccup. It caught my attention big time. Now, I remember thinking, wait, seriously, why isn't anyone talking about this? So, of course, I had to dig deeper. Could Hedera actually be built so differently that it could shrug off problems that make Ethereum stumble? And if so, could it mean that Hedera might someday be more widely adopted than Ethereum itself? These are some bold questions, right? I know. But the more that I explored, the more that I found myself on this wild journey. I uncovered a bullish pattern in Hedera's charts that some analysts are actually really excited about. I stumbled on an experimental project that literally lets you earn crypto from your old smartphones. I've actually started testing it out myself. And most importantly, I started to see bigger picture of where crypto might actually be heading next. And here's a spoiler. It's not all about the hype and the moonshots. It's actually about the real adoption and the reliability. So, buckle up. Today, I'm going to share the whole story with you guys. How a quiet underdog might be gearing up to outshine Ethereum. How a random network outage became a wake-up call, and what I'm doing personally to ride this potential new wave. Now, trust me here, by the end of this video, you might just look at crypto, the whole crypto world, just a little bit differently. So let's jump on in. All right, so the key moment that kicked off this whole thing really was that Amazon Web Services outage, right? Now, I know, cloud servers going down, it doesn't sound like a riveting drama, does it? But in crypto, it was a mini earthquake. Now, on October 20th, AWS had issues that affected loads of tech platforms. Ethereum, which a ton of decentralized apps really rely on, by the way, felt the heat. Now, some Ethereum-based services, they slowed down or went offline temporarily. It kind of was as if the ground beneath Ethereum shook for just a moment. Now, Hedera also uses some AWS infrastructure, so I braced for the worst, right? But nothing bad actually happened. Hedera's network, it just kept processing transactions like it was a normal day. There was no delays and there was no panic. I was honestly quite surprised. It's kind of like finding out that the backup generator kicked in while the whole neighborhood lost power. Let's think about what that means. Right? This wasn't just luck. It points to how Hedera is actually engineered. Now, the people behind Hedera made deliberate choices to ensure that the network stays reliable, even if part of the internet has a few bad days. Right? Now, in contrast, other networks, Ethereum included, had a pretty rough time because they were mostly and more exposed to that single point of failure. Right, let's think about a list that kind of got me all thinking about the reliability of crypto, right, and the decentralization. Is anything really truly decentralized? Right, we always talk about speed and decentralization, but what about plain old reliability, right? If big businesses are going to trust a blockchain, then it better work on a Monday morning when AWS hiccups or when traffic surges. And Hedera just gave a masterclass in that. Now, a quick personal tangent. Now, that whole incident, it taught me something about having backups, not just for networks, but even us regular users, right? If one of our crypto exchanges goes down at the wrong time, you don't actually want to be stuck, right? Now, I've actually made a bit of a habit to sign up for and KYC on with multiple exchanges as a kind of precaution. It's kind of like having a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, just in case one platform freezes up or gets overloaded. For example, I use exchanges like Blowfin and BitGet as part of that plan. Now, here's a quick heads up. I have a link in the description down below that basically takes you to our website when it has all of the affiliate links for all of the platforms that I use. So if you do use any of those, it helps support the channel here at no extra cost to yourselves, and I do thank you all in advance. The point is, whether it's a blockchain network or your trading account, a single point of failure can bite you when you least expect it. So you spread your risk where you can. Back over to Hedera, after seeing that resilience, I started digging into how Hedera actually works. And now, I won't bore you all with the deep technical lecture here, hash graphs and gossip protocols, anyone, right? But no. One thing to know though is that Hedera is not a regular blockchain. It's actually built very differently. It's actually governed by a council of big organizations, right? We are talking, Google, IBM, Boeing, and more sitting at the table. Now, at first, that sounds kind of the opposite of crypto's no central authority, right? Vibes. I get it, I do, right? But I guess I was skeptical too when I first heard about all of it, and that specific aspect too. But here is the flip side of that, right? Those big players, they demand stability and they demand trust. Hedera's design, with that in mind, focuses on being rock solid and enterprise friendly, and it shows, because when Ethereum and others tripped up just a little bit here, with AWS outages, Hedera just calmly kept doing its own thing. This reliability is kind of starting to get noticed, right? Crypto analyst Nick, not me, I know my name is Nick, but this is another guy from the Ncash official channel, pointed out that during the AWS fiasco, Hedera kept processing seamlessly all the transactions while others just stumbled. Now, in his view, that's exactly the kind of distraction that could make Hedera a go-to choice for companies that need a dependable network. Now, he put it perfectly by saying Hedera is not just emerging, it's actually integrating into the future fabric of digital finance. Now, that line, it kind of stuck with me, right? Integrating into the fabric of digital finance, basically becoming part of the underlying infrastructure of absolutely everything, quietly running the show while others are busy grabbing headlines. It's a pretty bold claim, but moments like that outage, they make it a lot more believable. Now, let's talk about the numbers for a second. Not today's price, don't worry, I won't hit you with the current quotes, that'll be outdated by the time you actually see this video, but instead, the trend, because recently, while the whole crypto market was on edge over things like inflation data and Bitcoin's rollercoaster moves, 𝗗𝗶𝘀, Hedera's token, was actually holding surprisingly steady. In fact, if it kind of even crept up just a little bit when others were dipping. Now that's a small thing, I know, but it tells me that some investors are quietly accumulating, or at least sticking with 𝗗𝗶𝘀 when many other altcoins were a bit shaky. And then I stumbled on something else, a classic pattern in the 𝗗𝗶𝘀 chart. And if you're into chart analysis, that is, listen to this. 𝗗𝗶𝘀 formed an inverse head and shoulder pattern. Basically, imagine a kind of funky W shape formation that traders love to see. Now, the head of the pattern was down at around the kind of mid 15-cent range, and the two shoulders are low kind of 16s. Now, it's nearing that neckline, which is just a fancy term for a breakout point. The translation is this: if 𝗗𝗶𝘀's price pushes a little bit higher past a certain point, technical analysts and analysts think that we actually could kick off a pretty strong rally. How strong? Well, some are saying possibly up to the mid 20-cent zone, which would be something like a 50% jump from where it has been hovering recently. Maybe even hitting 30 cents if momentum really does build. Now, of course, there are some caveats here. If it fails to gather steam and slips under 16 cents, well, that bullish setup, it could fizzle out and we might have to drop back down to the low teens, right? The key here isn't the exact numbers that I'm throwing around. Again, not financial advice, and this isn't a price prediction video per se. But the fact that analysts are turning bullish on Hedera for the first time in a while it's kind of on people's radar now for more than just its tech. It's the market, it's paying attention. There's a big shift happening. Now, Before I get ahead of myself with all the excitement, let me drop a quick reality check, especially since we're delving into some potentially optimistic stuff here. Now, this might just shock you, but I'm not a financial advisor, and nothing in this video is financial advice. Cryptocurrencies are highly volatile, and you could lose all of the money that you invest. You should always do your own research and consult a qualified professional. After all, your investments are entirely your responsibility, and you should know that nothing is ever guaranteed when it comes to investing. Neither I, this channel, nor YouTube are liable for any losses, and this video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Alright, disclaimers aside, let me kind of tell you about a little experiment that I've been doing, that ties into this whole adoption story that we're seeing with 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗰𝗍. Now, if you've been around my channel for a while, then you might already have heard that I've mentioned something called Unity nodes in the past. Now, it's not the main focus for today, but it's definitely part of the journey in exploring crypto's real-world potential. Basically, Unity is this project that lets you turn regular smartphones into a part of a decentralized telecoms network, and you get to earn crypto for it. Sounds pretty wild, I know, right? But when I first heard of it, I was so intrigued, but I also got a little bit skeptical. However, I did end up buying a Unity node NFT a little while back, which came with 200 licenses. Just imagine then there's 200 slots for your phone that I can connect to the network. The idea is actually that once the app goes live, the Unity app goes live, I can run the application on up to 200 phones, if I ever had that many, of course. And each phone will basically make verification calls to test the telecoms network. Now, for every call, the network gets a report on signal quality or any issues, and they get rewarded in crypto for helping out. It's kind of like mining, but instead of crunching math problems, you're just checking the cell network coverage. Now, I'm not about to go crazy and set up 200 devices on day one. No, I'm starting small. My plan is to go live with these 10 phones and run a test when the Unity app launches. Why 10? Well, I want to see how it works in practice, right? Work out if there are any kinks, to see how if it's truly kind of worth the effort or the upfront cost in buying more phones, and all that kind of stuff. And if it goes well, I can scale it up gradually, right? The cool part is that I can choose to be paid in different cryptocurrencies, and I get to choose what ones, right? Now I'm choosing to receive my rewards in a whole mix of different things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, ADA, XRP, maybe even 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗰𝗍, basically stacking more of the cryptos that I already believe in passively over time. Now, it almost sounds just too good to be true, like, hey, earn crypto by using your phone, but that's why I need to test it for myself, so I can give you guys a real report later on. And let me stress this. This isn't me saying, go and do this now, please, right? Please, please, please do your own research if you are curious. I'm going to put a link in the description down below to Unity's website, which will find their light paper and their rewards calculator so that you can crunch the numbers and see if it makes sense for you. Everyone's situation, of course, is different. I've actually kind of talked about Unity in many previous videos, so some of you guys probably know that this is all kind of old news, right? But here is the twist. I actually recently purchased a second and third Unity node, which means I have another set of licenses, 400 of them to be exact, right? Now, why on earth do I need 2 more? It's a good question, right? My plan is actually to lease out some of these licenses to people who want to get involved or are interested in Unity, but maybe don't want to buy a full master node and try to find homes for 200 licenses. So think of it like sharing the access, right? Unity's system allows these licenses to be leased out to people, which means someone can basically use one of my licenses slots and run the app on their own phone, and we'll just share the rewards. And we'll do a fair split, like 90% to you guys, 10% back to the channel here. So I have the upfront cost. I'll eventually earn that back from you guys paying that 10%, and you get 90% of the revenue, of the running rewards. This is kind of like a win-win situation, right? You guys get to dip your toes, and I get paid back for the initial upfront cost of the node, right? Now, they kind of get to try out earning with Unity without any of the big upfront costs, basically. And I earn a little bit from those licenses if if I'm not using it, right? Now, I'll have more information about all of this on the website, linked in the description down below, by the way, and also down on the Discord server as well, right? And you also find links to the website down in the Discord for all of the affiliate links and stuff like that. But the best place to join is going to be the free Discord server. And yes, that is a shameless plug for the Discord, but seriously, it's a completely free educational community where we talk about all of these kind of projects. Yeah, so if you are interested or have more questions, hop into the Discord. The worst thing to do is probably email me because we have tens of thousands of emails and things get lost there. So best place to actually contact us is going to be in the Discord. You can try a comment down below, but chances are I lose that in the sea of scammers anyway. Now, the reason that I bring up Unity here is not to divert into a whole different topic, no, but because it actually fits into a much bigger picture. Crypto is now creeping into real life in very unexpected ways. Right? We've got Hedera making a case for a reliable backbone, or being a reliable backbone for big enterprises. And you've got projects, that are doing remittance systems and for everyday people and stuff like that. And then we have things like Unity, which is like, hey, we can contribute to a global telecoms network with, a $50 Android phone and get paid in crypto for it. I find that rather amazing. Now, it's these kind of developments that make me more optimistic about crypto's next chapter and how it is going to be, defined by utility and adoption rather than just speculative meme coin mania. So I guess where does that really leave us then with Hedera versus Ethereum? I want to be rather clear here. I'm not here to declare that Hedera will kill Ethereum or anything overly dramatic or kind of prophecy like that. Right? Ethereum is pretty huge. I liken Ethereum to being, it is obviously home to DeFi, NFTs, and it has an insane amount of developers. But I think it's like the Yahoos or the Nokias or the Blackberries or the Blockbusters of the world. It has first mover advantage for sure. But at some point, if it can't innovate fast enough, can't keep up with the times, then it might actually just get left behind. Now, it's not going to go anywhere. I still see it being around, but not necessarily number 2 forever. But what I am saying here essentially is that Hedera does seem to be carving out a very important niche, which is being the ultra-reliable enterprise-grade network that can quietly power things behind the scenes. And that niche could actually be massive in terms of adoption. There's a scenario in the future where a lot of mainstream applications, businesses, and even governments use Hedera for their blockchain needs, precisely because it's stable and governed by known entities. Meanwhile, Ethereum might remain the playground for open innovation, experiments, and more consumer-facing decentralized applications. In other words, they might not even directly compete for the exact same pie. They're like 2 different flavors of the crypto network, each possibly dominating in its own little space. But here is a little analogy that popped into my head. Think of the tech world in the 90s. Right? We had Windows and we had Linux. Windows was user-friendly, widely adopted by businesses, and frankly, kind of centralized under Microsoft's vision. Unix, however, or Linux, I should say, was open-sourced, super innovative, loved by developers, right? And both thrived in very different ways. I kind of see a bit of a parallel here, right? Maybe Ethereum is the Linux of blockchains, open, flexible, sometimes chaotic, but wildly supported by developers, developer kind. And Hedera is more of the Windows, more structured, consistent, maybe even a bit more corporate and user-friendly, but ultimately the choice for big enterprises which will ultimately have users with cleaner UIs. Right, there's no analogy, of course, is going to be perfect here, but it helps kind of frame how both could coexist and succeed in very different ways. The exciting and maybe slightly scary part is that Hedera might quietly gain more real-world adoption than Ethereum before we even realize it. Right, remember the quote, integrating into the future fabric of digital finance. Fabric is something that you don't always kind of notice, but it's everywhere, holding things together. Now, it's possible in a few years, a whole ton of services from supply chain management to maybe your bank's digital currencies to some authentication system could be running on Hedera. And the average person won't necessarily even know it or even care about it. They'll just know that things work. Meanwhile, of course, crypto enthusiasts might be scratching their heads wondering, wait, how did Hedera get so big without us hyping it? Now, to wrap things up here is my takeaway. Hedera's resilience and the buzz around it have put it firmly on my radar. It showed that it can literally weather a storm that took down part of the internet. It's attracting attention for being a steady platformer, not just a speculative bet. And it's aligned with the broader momentum that we're seeing, a shift towards crypto projects that actually solve problems and can scale in the real world. Whether you're a HBAR holder, an Ethereum diehard, or just a blockchain observer, right? This story is a reminder to never count out the underdog, especially if that underdog has some serious tech and strategy behind it. I, for one, am going to be keeping an eye on things. I'm going to follow Hedera's journey rather closely. I'm going to keep poking and testing things like Unity nodes and sharing those experiences with all of you guys. Because watching all of these threads kind of come together, right? The tech, the adoption, the personal experiments, it really feels like we're on the cusp of something new in crypto. If you found this little adventure as eye-opening as I did, you can do me a favor. You can hit that like button and the subscribe button and join me in the next video. Right, we've got plenty more to explore, and I do promise it's only going to get more interesting from here. I'll see you in the next video.